She was left alone on a date until a billionaire stranger said he'll regret losing you. The soft hum of music floated through the dimly lit rooftop restaurant overlooking downtown Manhattan. Fairy lights twinkled above polished tables, and the scent of wine and roasted garlic lingered in the cool air. At a corner table, Olivia Hart checked her phone for what felt like the 100th time. The screen stayed blank. No new messages. She'd been sitting there for 43 minutes. Her glass of rosé had turned watery, condensation dripping down the stem like a quiet countdown of her humiliation. Around her, laughter and clinking glasses filled the night, but her chair felt colder by the minute. She tried to laugh it off, stirring her drink with the straw, whispering under her breath, "He probably got caught in traffic. Or maybe he's just not coming." The words stung harder when she said them aloud. A waiter passed, giving her that polite, pitying smile reserved for the ones left waiting. She straightened her posture, pretending to scroll through her phone, pretending not to care. Her reflection on the window revealed the truth mascara slightly smudged. Curls she'd spent an hour styling now limp in the humidity. The dress she'd splurged on, pale blue satin, looked too hopeful under the golden lights. She'd planned everything for tonight at dinner where her on and off boyfriend would finally make it official. Instead, all she had was an empty chair and a receipt she didn't want to sign. "Miss, would you like me to clear the other setting?" the waiter asked softly. She nodded, swallowing hard, forcing a smile. "Yeah, he's not coming." The waiter nodded sympathetically and left. And just when she thought the night couldn't get more humiliating, a low voice behind her said, "Whoever stood you up just made the biggest mistake of his life." Olivia turned. A man at the bar, maybe mid-30s, in a dark gray suit and loosened tie, was watching her not in pity, but with quiet certainty. His eyes held something different, steady, grounded. He raised his glass slightly. "To him," he said, "because he'll regret losing you." For a moment she just stared, unsure how to respond. "You don't even know me," she said, half laughing, half blinking back tears. "True," he replied, "but I know a mistake when I see one." The corners of his mouth lifted, not flirtatious, just kind. Something about him disarmed her, the calm in his tone, the way he didn't look away. "Come on," he said gently, gesturing to the empty stool beside him. "At least let a stranger make sure your night doesn't end like this." She hesitated, heart pounding, torn between pride and exhaustion. But then, maybe for the first time all night, she chose herself. She stood, grabbed her purse, and walked toward the bar. The waiter glanced over, surprised, as she sat down beside the stranger. "I'm Olivia," she said softly. "Ethan," he replied, offering his hand. His palm was warm, his grip steady. For the first time that evening, she smiled, a real one. Outside, the city lights flickered like a heartbeat, and somewhere between the clink of their glasses and the soft laughter that followed, something quietly shifted, the kind of beginning no one plans for, but everyone hopes for. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the blinds of Olivia's small apartment, glinting off a half-finished bouquet on her kitchen counter. Her head still buzzed faintly from last night's wine and the memory of the stranger at the bar, Ethan. She replayed his voice in her mind, calm and certain. "He'll regret losing you." Maybe it was just a line, but something about the way he said it had felt real. She shook off the thought, tying the last ribbon on the bouquet for a client. Rent was due in 5 days, and she could not afford to drift into daydreams about kind strangers. Her flower shop, Bloom and Thread, was barely staying afloat. The city rent was merciless, and clients were scarce since the boutique hotel across the street had closed. Still, she showed up every morning before sunrise, trimming stems, humming softly to herself, pretending things were not falling apart. Around noon, The bell over the shop door chimed. Olivia looked up, surprised to see the same man from the bar walking in, wearing a charcoal suit this time. Her breath caught for a second. "Ethan?" she said before realizing she might sound too eager. He smiled slightly, hands in his pockets. "I hope you do not mind me finding your shop. I wanted to thank you for the company last night. You turned a lonely evening into something beautiful." Olivia blinked, unsure how to respond. "You were the one saving me from disaster," she said with a shy laugh. "So, consider us even." Ethan glanced around the shop, taking in the chaos of vases, ribbons, and petals scattered across the counter. "This place is yours?" he asked. She nodded. "Mine and the bank's," she said dryly. He smiled at that honesty, walking closer to a bouquet of pale lilacs. "I would like to order something," he said finally, "for someone who has forgotten how to believe in herself." Olivia tilted her head, unsure if he was teasing. "What kind of flowers would you give her?" she asked. "Whatever reminds her she is worth showing up for," he said quietly. There was a pause, then she smiled, reaching for fresh roses and baby's breath. As she arranged them, their conversation flowed easily, as if they had known each other longer than a single night. Ethan asked about her work, about how she chose colors, about what flowers meant to her. She told him about her mother, who had taught her that flowers were small stories of hope, each one blooming even in dirt. By the time the bouquet was done, Ethan was silent, watching her with something thoughtful in his eyes. "How much do I owe you?" he asked. Olivia hesitated, then shrugged. "You can pay next time you need flowers." Ethan smiled. "Then I guess I will have to come back." He left, the doorbell chiming softly behind him, and for the first time in weeks, Olivia felt lighter. Days passed, and true to his word, Ethan came back once for lilies, once for daisies, once just for coffee from the shop's old espresso machine. Each visit was simple, calm, but carried that quiet warmth she had forgotten existed. One evening, as the city lights flickered on, she locked up the shop and found Ethan waiting outside. "You are here again," she said with a grin. "Guilty," he said, slipping his hands into his pockets. "You make the kind of flowers that make people believe the world can start over." She laughed softly, brushing a petal from her sleeve. "That might be the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me." He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "You deserve to hear it more often." The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of jasmine from the planter boxes. They walked side by side down the quiet street, their steps matching without effort. Olivia glanced at him, curiosity growing. He spoke little about himself, and when she asked what he did, he only said, "I work with investments." Something about the way he avoided details made her suspect there was more to the story, but she let it go. For now, it was enough that someone saw her not as a girl who was stood up, not as a struggling florist, but as someone who mattered. As they paused at the corner, Ethan looked at her and said softly, "Olivia, sometimes the best stories begin with the wrong night." And though she did not fully understand what he meant, she smiled anyway, because for the first time she believed it might be true. 2 weeks later, Olivia stood in the back room of her flower shop surrounded by stacks of invoices and unopened boxes. Her phone buzzed with another reminder from the landlord about the overdue rent. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, the scent of fresh lilies almost masking the panic in her chest. Business had been slower than ever, and though Ethan's visits always brightened her day, they did not pay the bills. She hated admitting it, but Bloom and Thread was drowning. She thought about calling her old boyfriend, the one who had stood her up, just to ask for a loan, but pride stopped her. She could not go back to the man who had made her feel small. As she turned to adjust a vase, the bell over the shop door rang. Ethan stepped in, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You look like you have been fighting a war," he said lightly, setting 1 cup down for her. She managed a tired smile. "Just fighting with numbers. The flowers are winning." He studied her for a moment, his tone softening. "Let me guess. Rent?" She hesitated, not wanting pity. "It is just a rough patch," she said quickly. "I will figure it out." Ethan nodded slowly. I do not doubt that. He placed a small white envelope on the counter. I need a favor, a big one. Olivia frowned. What kind of favor? I am organizing a charity gala next weekend, he said. We are raising funds for small businesses and creative programs. I was hoping you could handle the floral design. Big stage, spotlight, the whole thing. It would mean a lot. Her eyes widened. Ethan, that sounds incredible, but I cannot handle something that big. My shop is tiny. Your shop is exactly what it should be, he replied. Authentic. You have an eye for meaning, not extravagance. That is what people remember. She blinked, touched by the faith in his voice. I would love to, she said quietly. Good, he said with a smile. You will be the main floral partner for Hale Foundation's Winter Gala. She laughed nervously. Wait, what foundation? Hale Foundation, he repeated, a hint of amusement in his eyes. Do not worry, you will find out soon enough. The week that followed was a blur of color and sleepless nights. Olivia poured every bit of herself into the arrangement's hundreds of roses, orchids, and hydrangeas, each bouquet telling a story. She borrowed a friend's van, hauled crates across town, and forgot to eat more than once. When the day of the event arrived, she barely recognized herself in the mirror hair swept up, simple black dress, a touch of lipstick. She looked professional. She arrived at the Grand Marlowe Hotel, an elegant venue shimmering with chandeliers and marble floors. Her breath caught at the sight of it. Guests in tuxedos and gowns floated through the golden-lit room, and in the center of it all stood her floral arch, glowing beneath crystal lights. You did this? A voice behind her said. She turned to see Ethan, dressed in a black tuxedo that fit him perfectly. He looked different tonight, confident, composed, like he belonged to this world of polished elites. It is stunning, he said. You outdid yourself. Thank you, she managed. I almost did not make it. I knew you would, he said simply. Then a voice echoed from the stage, the host welcoming everyone to the Hale Foundation's annual Winter Gala. Olivia froze. The name sounded familiar. When the host continued, her pulse skipped. Please welcome our chairman and benefactor, Mr. Ethan Alexander Hale. The room erupted in applause. Olivia stood motionless as Ethan walked onto the stage, shaking hands, smiling, the spotlight catching the silver edge of his cufflinks. Her chest tightened. He was the Hale, the billionaire whose name was on countless buildings and charities. The man she thought was just a kind stranger at a bar. A camera flash went off, and for a moment, their eyes met across the crowd. He looked at her with quiet apology, but she turned away before he could reach her. Her hands trembled as she packed up her tools, the sound of applause fading behind her. By the time he stepped off the stage, she was gone, leaving only a single white rose on the table where they had stood earlier, petals trembling in the soft glow of the chandelier. 2 weeks later, Olivia stood in the back room of her flower shop surrounded by stacks of invoices and unopened boxes. Her phone buzzed with another reminder from the landlord about the overdue rent. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, the scent of fresh lilies almost masking the panic in her chest. Business had been slower than ever, and though Ethan's visits always brightened her day, they did not pay the bills. She hated admitting it, but Bloom and Thread was drowning. She thought about calling her old boyfriend, the one who had stood her up, just to ask for a loan, but pride stopped her. She could not go back to the man who had made her feel small. As she turned to adjust a vase, the bell over the shop door rang. Ethan stepped in, holding 2 cups of coffee. You look like you have been fighting a war, he said lightly, setting 1 cup down for her. She managed a tired smile. Just fighting with numbers. The flowers are winning. He studied her for a moment, his tone softening. Let me guess. Rent? She hesitated, not wanting pity. It is just a rough patch, she said quickly. I will figure it out. Ethan nodded slowly. I do not doubt that. He placed a small white envelope on the counter. I need a favor, a big one. Olivia frowned. What kind of favor? I am organizing a charity gala next weekend, he said. We are raising funds for small businesses and creative programs. I was hoping you could handle the floral design. Big stage, spotlight, the whole thing. It would mean a lot. Her eyes widened. Ethan, that sounds incredible, but I cannot handle something that big. My shop is tiny. Your shop is exactly what it should be, he replied. Authentic. You have an eye for meaning, not extravagance. That is what people remember. She blinked, touched by the faith in his voice. I would love to, she said quietly. Good, he said with a smile. You will be the main floral partner for Hale Foundation's Winter Gala. She laughed nervously. Wait, what foundation? Hale Foundation, he repeated, a hint of amusement in his eyes. Do not worry, you will find out soon enough. The week that followed was a blur of color and sleepless nights. Olivia poured every bit of herself into the arrangements, hundreds of roses, orchids, and hydrangeas, each bouquet telling a story. She borrowed a friend's van, hauled crates across town, and forgot to eat more than once. When the day of the event arrived, she barely recognized herself in the mirror, hair swept up, simple black dress, a touch of lipstick. She looked professional. She arrived at the Grand Marlowe Hotel, an elegant venue shimmering with chandeliers and marble floors. Her breath caught at the sight of it. Guests in tuxedos and gowns floated through the golden-lit room, and in the center of it all stood her floral arch, glowing beneath crystal lights. You did this? A voice behind her said. She turned to see Ethan, dressed in a black tuxedo that fit him perfectly. He looked different tonight, confident, composed, like he belonged to this world of polished elites. It is stunning, he said. You outdid yourself. Thank you, she managed. I almost did not make it. I knew you would, he said simply. Then a voice echoed from the stage, the host welcoming everyone to the Hale Foundation's annual Winter Gala. Olivia froze. The name sounded familiar. When the host continued, her pulse skipped. Please welcome our chairman and benefactor, Mr. Ethan Alexander Hale. The room erupted in applause. Olivia stood motionless as Ethan walked onto the stage, shaking hands, smiling, the spotlight catching the silver edge of his cufflinks. Her chest tightened. He was the Hale, the billionaire whose name was on countless buildings and charities. The man she thought was just a kind stranger at a bar. A camera flash went off, and for a moment, their eyes met across the crowd. He looked at her with quiet apology, but she turned away before he could reach her. Her hands trembled as she packed up her tools, the sound of applause fading behind her. By the time he stepped off the stage, she was gone, leaving only a single white rose on the table where they had stood earlier, petals trembling in the soft glow of the chandelier. Snow fell gently over the city, blanketing the streets in quiet silver. Days had passed since the gala, yet Olivia's heart still ached every time she thought of that moment, Ethan's name echoing across the ballroom, the lights catching his confident smile, and the crushing realization that she had been falling for a billionaire who had never told her who he really was. She replayed every word he had ever said, trying to decide which ones had been real. Her phone had buzzed all weekend with messages from him, but she could not bring herself to answer. How could she, after realizing she was just another secret in his perfect world? That Sunday, she returned to her shop early, sweeping petals that were not really there, trying to keep her hands busy so her thoughts would stay quiet. The bell above the door rang. Her stomach clenched instinctively. Ethan stood there, still in his black coat, his eyes softer than she remembered. Olivia, please, he began. You left before I could explain. She did not look at him. You mean before the part where you told me your last name is Hale, the same one printed on every building in this city? Her voice trembled, anger and hurt tangled together. You lied to me, Ethan. I never lied, he said quietly. I just did not tell you everything. She laughed bitterly. That is convenient. He stepped closer. When I met you, I wanted to know who I was when nobody saw the name, the money, the foundation. You saw me before all of that, and I could not risk losing it. And now you have, she whispered, eyes glossy. You should go. For a moment, he looked like he might argue, but instead he nodded slowly. If that is what you want. The door closed softly behind him, and the silence that followed was heavier than before. Winter crept deeper into the city. Business dwindled again, and Olivia moved like someone underwater, still functioning, but barely. She told herself she was fine, that she had learned her lesson. But sometimes, when she locked up at night and saw a black car pause across the street before disappearing, her chest tightened with something she refused to name. Weeks later, just before Valentine's Day, a courier delivered a large envelope to her shop. Inside was an invitation embossed in gold. The Hale Foundation presents The Art of Hope, a charity exhibit for local artists. Her breath caught as she read the list of featured names. Near the bottom, one stood out, asterisk, Olivia Brooks, Petals of Resilience. Asterisk, confusion and disbelief crashed together. There had to be a mistake. She had never applied for any exhibit. That night, she sat on her couch, staring at the invitation under the lamplight. Her sketchbook, the one she used to draw in between orders, lay beside it, filled with forgotten sketches of flowers and cityscapes. She turned its pages slowly until she saw the one that stopped her cold. A half-finished sketch of Ethan, sitting by the counter, smiling over a coffee cup. Her fingers traced the lines. Maybe it was time to stop hiding from the truth. The next evening, Olivia arrived at the gallery wearing a simple navy dress. The space was radiant spotlights gleaming against white walls, soft piano music floating through the air. Her heart pounded as she saw her artwork displayed across an entire panel, each piece carefully framed. Beneath one of them was a small card, asterisk, dedicated to the woman who showed me what authenticity looks like. E.H. asterisk, her breath caught. Ethan stood across the room, speaking with a small crowd, his posture humble but unmistakable. When his gaze found hers, everything else fell away. He walked toward her slowly, not with the confidence of a billionaire, but with the quiet hope of a man seeking forgiveness. "You did this?" she asked when he reached her. "You submitted my sketches? They deserve to be seen," he said simply. "You deserve to be seen, not hidden behind rent notices and worries. I just gave the world what I already knew, that you create beauty from struggle." Her throat tightened, and for a moment, words failed her. "You had no right," she whispered. "Maybe not," he said, "but I had a responsibility to make things right. Olivia, I am sorry I hurt you. I never wanted you to feel small next to me. You are the only person who ever made me feel human again." For a long moment, she just stared at him, the noise of the room fading until there was only the sound of her heartbeat and his quiet, trembling honesty. Then she said softly, "This does not fix everything, Ethan." "I know," he said, "but maybe it is a place to start." She exhaled shakily, and something inside her finally let go. Maybe forgiveness, like love, did not come all at once. Maybe it began with the courage to stand still and look at someone who had broken your heart and still see light. Olivia stood in the middle of the gallery long after most of the guests had gone, her eyes drifting over her drawings as soft jazz echoed faintly through the speakers. The night had been surreal. People she had never met shook her hand, complimented her work, and even asked where they could buy her pieces. For once, she was not just the florist who struggled to pay rent. She was an artist. But even amid the praise, her mind lingered on Ethan's words. She could still feel the weight of his apology, and the way he had looked at her as if he had been waiting his entire life to say those things. When the lights dimmed and the last of the guests left, she found herself alone in the quiet space. A familiar scent of cedar and clean soap reached her before she heard his voice. "You forgot this," Ethan said softly, holding out her sketchbook. She turned, startled. "You kept it?" "It was in your old workroom," he said. "I thought it belonged here tonight." She took it, fingers brushing his. The moment stretched between them, full of everything they had left unsaid. "You know," she began quietly, "you could have told me the truth that night at the restaurant." Ethan nodded, guilt flickering across his face. "I wanted to, but when you looked at me, I felt like I was just a man, not a name, not a headline. I did not want to lose that." "And yet, you almost did," she said. "I know," he replied, "but I am here now. No secrets, no walls." He exhaled slowly. "Olivia, I meant every word I said. You changed the way I see people, the way I see myself. The money, the events, the fame, they mean nothing if I cannot be real with someone. She watched him carefully, searching for the man from that bar, the one who had seen her when no one else had. He was still there, but now she could also see the weight he carried, the expectations, the loneliness behind all the success. "What do you want from me, Ethan?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A chance," he said. "Just one chance to prove that what I feel for you has nothing to do with guilt or pride. I want to build something honest with you, even if we start small." She hesitated, her chest tightening with emotions she had tried so hard to bury. "I do not know if I can trust you again," she admitted. "Then let me earn it," he said simply, "day by day in the way I show up." He paused, his eyes soft but steady. "You taught me that love is not about perfection. It is about showing up even when you are scared." The words landed deep. She remembered that first night, sitting alone at that restaurant, and how he had seen her when she felt invisible. Maybe she could see him now, not as the billionaire with power, but as a man trying to start over. "I will think about it," she said finally. He smiled faintly. "That is all I can ask for." As she turned to leave, she noticed something framed on the far wall that she had not seen before. It was her old bouquet sketch, the same one she had left on the restaurant table that night when he had first spoken to her. Beneath it was a small plaque that read, "Asterisk." She stayed, and so did I. Asterisk. Her throat tightened, tears blurring her vision. Ethan followed her gaze. "I kept it," he said softly. "It reminded me that sometimes the smallest moments can change everything." She looked back at him, her heart warring between pain and hope. "You really do not give up, do you?" "Not on the things that matter," he said. She gave a quiet laugh through her tears. "You are infuriating." "So I have been told," he said with a smile. Silence fell again, comfortable this time. Finally, she said, "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Olivia," he replied. As she walked out into the cool night, she glanced back through the glass doors. Ethan was still standing there, watching her leave, his expression a mixture of longing and peace. For the first time, she did not feel like she was running away. Maybe, just maybe, she was walking toward something real. The following weeks unfolded with quiet steadiness. Olivia returned to her shop, not because everything was healed, but because routine was the only thing that kept her grounded. Every morning, she unlocked the door, tied her apron, and trimmed fresh flowers with the same care she had given since the beginning. Business had begun to pick up again thanks to the gallery exposure, but the real change came from inside her. She was no longer afraid of being seen. Still, Ethan kept his word. He did not push, did not overwhelm her with calls or gifts. Instead, he showed up in small ways, sending her lunch when he knew she skipped meals, placing anonymous orders for flowers that ended up being for local hospitals or schools, and sometimes just walking by the shop to wave from outside. The quiet persistence was disarming. One evening, near closing time, she saw him standing across the street under the glow of the streetlight. He did not come in. He simply smiled, as if to say he was still there. Something in her chest softened. A few days later, a storm rolled into the city. Wind howled against the windows, and rain drummed endlessly on the glass. Olivia stayed late, rearranging the front display so the flowers would not wilt in the cold draft. The bell above the door jingled unexpectedly. Ethan stood there, soaked from the rain, holding a brown paper bag. "You are going to catch a cold," she said, startled. "You are one to talk," he replied, his voice light but tired. "I brought soup." She blinked, a laugh bubbling up despite the tension. "You walked through a storm for soup?" "For you," he said simply, placing the bag on the counter. They sat together on the floor behind the counter, eating in silence, the sound of rain filling the spaces between their words. "How do you do it?" she asked suddenly. "How do you stay so calm when you have everything to lose?" He looked at her thoughtfully. "Because I already lost the things that mattered once, and I am not letting fear take them again." She stared at him, realizing that beneath the calm exterior was a man who had learned to rebuild after his own storms. "I am scared too," she admitted softly. "I am scared of believing again." "Then let us be scared together," he said. "Maybe that is what courage really looks like." The honesty of it made her chest tighten. They stayed there until the storm eased, talking about everything and nothing, the kind of conversation that makes time disappear. When he finally stood to leave, he reached into his coat pocket and placed something on the counter. It was a tiny pressed flower encased in glass, framed with a thin gold edge. "It was from the bouquet you left behind that night," he said quietly. "I wanted you to have it, a reminder that even what seems forgotten can still become something beautiful." Olivia's fingers trembled as she picked it up. "You really kept everything, did you not?" "Only what mattered," he said. After he left, she stood by the window, holding the tiny glass piece up to the light. The soft glow refracted through the petal, scattering color across her hands. She felt the strange ache of gratitude and longing all at once. The next morning, the storm had cleared, and sunlight spilled across the wet pavement. When she arrived at the shop, a note was taped to the door. It read, "Meeting at City Garden, 6 p.m. E. She almost laughed at the simplicity of it, but something told her this was different. The day passed slowly, each hour tugging at her curiosity. By the time evening arrived, the air was crisp, and the garden glistened from the recent rain. She found Ethan near the fountain, setting down a small crate filled with soil and seeds. "What is this?" she asked, puzzled. "A new project," he said. "Community garden, sponsored by the foundation. I thought maybe you would want to help design it. Flowers for everyone, not just the rich." She looked at him, her heart swelling. "You are serious?" "Completely," he said. "I realized something, Olivia. I do not want to build towers anymore. I want to build roots." Her eyes stung, tears gathering. "That is the cheesiest thing you have ever said," she whispered. "Then it must be true," he replied with a smile. In that moment, standing in the fading sunlight, surrounded by soil and seeds and second chances, she realized that maybe this was how love really grew, not from perfection, but from persistence, watered by forgiveness and time. Spring arrived slowly, melting the last traces of winter from the city. Olivia's flower shop was brighter than ever, not because of fancy renovations, but because she finally felt like she was growing again. The community garden project had become her new passion. Every weekend, volunteers came to help plant rows of roses, lavender, and daisies, each bed marked with handwritten signs from children and families who had once only seen flowers behind glass windows. Ethan was always there too, wearing gloves that looked far too clean for gardening, laughing when she teased him about it. "You are getting better," she said one morning as he clumsily patted soil around a seedling. "I am trying," he said with a grin. "I think the flowers like you more than they like me." "That is because they can sense humility," she replied, smiling. Their banter came easily now, soft and genuine, like sunlight filtering through leaves. Yet underneath, there was something deeper taking root. The way he looked at her when she spoke, the way he listened, as if every word mattered, those things had not changed. What had changed was her ability to meet his gaze without fear. One afternoon, while she was arranging new plants, Ethan approached her with a clipboard. "We are almost ready for the opening ceremony," he said, "but I want to show you something first." He led her toward the center of the garden, where a tall white archway stood covered in ivy. Hanging from the arch was a wooden plaque carved with the words, "The Hail and Bloom Garden, dedicated to the beauty of everyday hearts." Olivia froze, her hands hovering near her chest. "You named it after both of us?" Ethan nodded. "You built the soul of this place. I just made sure the world could see it." She looked at him, speechless. For a long moment, the sound of birds and distant laughter filled the air. "Ethan," she began, her voice soft, "I do not know what to say." "Say you will stay," he said quietly. "Not for the foundation, not for the work, just stay with me." She felt her breath catch, her heart pounding against her ribs. All the walls she had built over months seemed to tremble. "I thought you said you would take things slow," she whispered. "I did," he said, smiling gently. But love has its own timing. The truth in his tone undid her. Before she could answer, a voice called from across the garden, breaking the spell. It was Mrs. Carver, an elderly volunteer holding a bouquet of tulips. "Mr. Hale, we need more soil by the east bed." Ethan turned and nodded. "I am on it," he said, but before walking away, he leaned closer to Olivia and murmured, "Do not run from this, please." She stood still, watching him move across the garden, sleeves rolled up, helping carry bags of soil with other volunteers. It struck her how different this version of him was. The man who once commanded boardrooms now laughing with strangers under the open sky. Later that evening, after the volunteers had gone, Olivia lingered near the archway, tracing the carved letters with her fingertips. The setting sun painted the garden in gold and rose tones. She heard footsteps behind her, then felt Ethan's presence beside her. "Do you remember the night we met?" he asked. "Of course," she said with a small laugh. "You were the stranger at the bar who said, 'He will regret losing you.' And I meant it," he said. "But I never expected that the person I was trying to comfort would end up teaching me how to live." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and realized that the distance between their worlds no longer felt impossible. "Ethan," she said softly, "I am still scared." "So am I," he admitted, "but I would rather be scared with you than safe without you." She smiled, tears forming but her heart finally calm. "Then maybe it is time," she said. "Time to stop waiting for the perfect moment and just choose it." He reached out and took her hand gently, their fingers intertwining like roots finding each other beneath the soil. The wind carried the scent of fresh earth and blooming lilacs, wrapping around them as the first stars began to appear overhead. Neither of them spoke again, because for once, silence said everything. The grand opening of the Hale and Bloom Garden arrived on a clear summer morning. The city gathered under white tents and rows of colorful flowers that stretched as far as the eye could see. Children ran between the flower beds laughing. Families took pictures near the ivy arch, and the air was alive with music and the scent of roses. Olivia stood near the stage, holding a small bouquet she had arranged herself, her heart swelling with quiet disbelief. This garden had once been a dream she was too afraid to imagine, and now it was real, blooming before her eyes. Ethan stood at the podium, addressing the crowd with warmth and ease. "This garden," he said, "is not just a space for beauty. It is a reminder that the smallest acts of kindness can grow into something extraordinary." His gaze found hers in the crowd as he continued, and it all started with one. The applause rose around him, but Olivia could only hear the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. When the ceremony ended, people moved toward the refreshment tables, and Ethan walked down from the stage. He approached her with that familiar, steady smile. "You did it," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "We did it," he corrected gently. "Together." Before she could respond, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something wrapped in soft linen. "There is one last thing," he said, unwrapping it slowly. Inside was a small glass frame, the same pressed flower he had given her months ago, but now it was joined by another petal, pale and delicate, shaped into a tiny heart. "I added something," he said softly. "One for you, one for me." Because none of this would have existed without that night. Her eyes glistened with tears. "Ethan, I do not know how to thank you for everything." "Then do not," he said. "Just promise me one thing." "What is that?" she asked, her voice trembling. He took her hand and led her toward the archway. The crowd quieted as they turned to watch, sensing something special unfolding. He knelt down, not with grand theatrics, but with the quiet sincerity that had always defined him. "Promise me," he said, looking up at her, "that you will keep believing in what you build. And if you will let me, I would like to build the rest of my life with you." The world seemed to still around them. The sunlight caught the edges of the white arch, casting soft halos of gold around their faces. Olivia covered her mouth, a laugh breaking through her tears. "You are unbelievable," she whispered. "That is not a no," he teased, smiling. She lowered her hands, meeting his eyes. "It is a yes," she said. 100 times yes. The crowd erupted in applause, petals floating through the air, as if the garden itself was celebrating. Ethan stood, pulling her into an embrace, their laughter mingling with the sound of wind chimes hanging nearby. In that moment, everything felt full circle: the restaurant, the heartbreak, the gallery, the garden. Every mistake, every tear had led them here. Weeks later, they held a small wedding ceremony right in the same garden, surrounded by friends, volunteers, and rows of flowers that bloomed brighter than ever. Olivia wore a simple ivory dress, her hair loose, and in her hands, she carried the very first bouquet she had ever made, the same one Ethan had kept from that night at the restaurant. When they exchanged vows, Ethan's voice was steady but full of emotion. "You taught me that love is not measured by status or wealth," he said, "but by presence, by showing up, even when it hurts." Olivia smiled through tears and replied, "And you taught me that second chances do not erase the past. They bloom from it." The guests clapped, and as they kissed beneath the hail and bloom archway, the crowd cheered, tossing petals into the air. The scene glowed with sunlight and laughter, a perfect picture of redemption and grace. Later, as evening fell, they stood together watching the lanterns rise into the night sky. Ethan wrapped his arm around her, whispering, "Do you ever think about how it all began?" She leaned her head on his shoulder. "All the time," she said softly. "It started with a mistake." He smiled, kissing the top of her head. "The best mistake I ever made." And under the soft shimmer of the lanterns, surrounded by the scent of blooming flowers, they both knew that this was more than a happy ending. It was a promise kept, written in petals and time.